Good evening. With it being 7 p.m., I'll call the meeting of the Board of Education for the Francis Howell School District to order.
So moved.
No, we don't need it.
I don't care, I'm moving whatever. I'm just gonna make it come to order.
This evening, we have with us our Francis Howell High School senior, Ryan Russell, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I'll move it.
Motion made by Mrs. Ferguson. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Lang. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Next on our agenda is recognitions. Mr. Dykman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. The Francis Howell School District is proud to announce that two budding scientists from Francis Howell High School, Lori Lee and Ryan Russell, have successfully completed the Students and Teachers as Research Scientists Program, or STARS, at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Over the summer, 96 talented high school students from around the St. Louis metro area participated in the STARS program. STARS pairs academically talented high school seniors with more than 60 university science mentors. It takes special determination and passion to spend 6 weeks conducting intensive research while your friends are laying on the beach. Lori couldn't be here tonight because she just left yesterday to study abroad for a year, but Ryan is here, and I want him to come up to the podium primarily to tell us not only about his research, but the title of his research paper, because it's all Greek to me. No, I mean literally, there's a bunch of Greek letters in the title of his research paper. Ryan?
Thank you. The title of my paper is Intercavity Laser Spectroscopy and the Rotational Analysis of the Electronic Transitions of Copper Oxide, Determination of Molecular Constants for the Beta Doublet Delta State of Copper Oxide. That sounds really big, but if you're a quantum physicist, it makes a lot of sense, and it's actually not the longest one I've read. So basically, a quick synopsis of the paper is that we shined a light through a copper cathode, and what that did is that when the laser, is what it really is, interacts with the copper and the copper cathode, we get data from that, and what we do is we analyze that data to get molecular constants, which we will then use to simulate bigger molecules, because this is just the base for a bigger study. Here, thank you all.
Thank you, Ryan. Our science star, Ryan Russell. Yep, the folks are coming on. The Francis Howell School District is proud to be selected as one of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch top workplaces for the 5th consecutive year. Francis Howell ranked in the top workplace large business category, which is comprised of similarly sized organizations. All Francis Howell employees had the opportunity to take the confidential workplace survey earlier this spring. It focused on organizational health and employee engagement. Nearly 1,500 responses were received over a 3-week period, representing almost 3/4 of Francis Howell employees. This statement by our employees sends a strong message to our parents, students, and the community that we have a top-notch organization, and that's why people want to work here. So we want to recognize all 2,000-plus district employees for achieving this distinction for 5 consecutive years. Give yourselves a hand. And representing our different work groups tonight, from FHEA, we have Anita Keener. From FESPA, Jordan Fruit, also the reigning Support Staff Employee of the Year. Dale DePalm, Facilities Electrician. From SAA, President Michelle Christopher. From Early Childhood, Tracy Horn. Vacation Station, Lynn Bajer. PAT, Susan Zimmerling. From Technology, well, Rich Wilson and Jason Adams. And Gifted Sped, Will Vanderpool. You guys want to come on up so we can get a group picture, please? Thank you, Mrs. Cope.
Great, thank you. And congratulations, Francis Howell School District. I don't believe we have any patron comments this evening. FHEA? FESPA? SAA? Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Ferguson. By roll call?
Ms. Ferguson?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Next on our agenda is Academic High Target. And we have a presentation.
Thank you. So this evening, I will be presenting some preliminary data from the 16-17 school year. See if the clicker works. Oh, did you click? Maybe it might be a group effort tonight with clicking. Okay. Thank you. Just checking. Yep, it works. So DESE has shared their timeline for releasing the annual performance report with us, and so it's tentative. We should be receiving that on September 22nd. So as a result, we will hold our academic workshop with the Board of Education in October. And since we don't have all of our MAP data yet at this time, this presentation won't focus on any of the MAP data. It will be other end-of-the-year data from last school year. And then just a reminder with our assessment schedule, because of our new standards that were approved back in April of 2016 by the state board, we've been transitioning into assessments that align to the new revised Missouri Learning Standards. So we're almost there. You can see all the boxes in orange are the new standards. So this year, for the first time, our students will be taking a new assessment in English, language arts, and math that are aligned to the new standards. Science was supposed to be the old version of the test, and that wasn't going to happen, and the new version wasn't happening until 18-19. But whenever there's a new version of a test, there's always a field test or a pilot of the new assessment. And with DESE's limited budget for assessment, it would have been a double cost because they would have been giving the science test plus testing various groups of students for the field test. So they opted to just do the field test only for all school districts in Missouri. So it will accelerate the implementation of the new science standards. However, though, since it is a field test, the scores will not be included in the APR, and we won't receive any of that data, unfortunately, for this year. So then we'll have that assessment would happen officially in 18-19 when we receive that data. So it'll be a little bit of a change in what we're used to. And then the new social studies exam would happen in 19-20. So I'm going to kind of start here with the end in mind. Post-secondary placement is one of the standards within our annual performance report. And so this slide shows what our kids are doing 6 months out of high school. And the college data for 4-year and 2-year comes from the National Clearinghouse report that reports where kids are in school, and that covers the majority of colleges across United States. And so then the other data comes from our 180-day follow-up. And so as you can see from the data, we hover around 80% of our students that are attending a 2 or 4-year college after graduation. And we consistently have around 10% of our graduates that are working after high school. The unknowns, that's a small percentage of our graduates that we just aren't able to get hold of when we do the follow-up. So we reach out via email, via phone numbers, and we aren't able to find out what they're doing. So that's a small portion of our population. The post-secondary placement, like I said, is one of the standards under college and career readiness. And given our 3 years of data about where kids are in terms of college, military, or working, we will receive all of our, we have no reason why we wouldn't receive all of our 10 points in this area for the APR. Graduation rate is another one of our standards for our annual performance report. And instead of giving you just all of our history data, really we've been hovering around that 95% range. And so I also wanted to share then the 5-year average for Missouri is 87% and the national is 83%. So we are significantly higher than Missouri and the national rate for graduation. And I highlighted a couple programs that we have in place that really help support our consistently high graduation rate. Our early warning system for our at-risk students, our transition coach program that helps bring our students who have dropped, reaching out to them 6 months after they've dropped to get them back into school, and then our Missouri Option program. We had 52 graduates last year through our Missouri Option program. So if you think about that, if we didn't have that program for students who, for whatever reason, are credit deficient, those are 52 kids that probably wouldn't have been able to graduate and would have been dropped. So that's an incredible program that supports our students. So graduation rate is 30 points on the APR, and so we will receive all 30 of our points on the APR for this standard. This is a new piece of data that we're starting to look at for our graduates. So as we work on increasing the number of students accessing AP, we also want to look at then during their high school career and our kids graduate, how many students have actually accessed AP when they graduate. Because we know that an AP class is an introductory college level course, and we know that students, when they stretch themselves and take that challenge rigorous course, that the outcomes of college are completion are much greater. And so then looking at that data from that lens of what are graduates doing with AP. And so as you can see from this data, we're consistently around that 50% plus or minus mark of our graduates taking at least one AP course. But if you go back and you think about the post-secondary placement data that I showed, when you look at our 4-year graduation rate was about 47%, so that kind of mirrors the AP, but when you add our 2-year and 4-year together, that's 80%. So we have about 80% of our kids that are going away to college, but yet only 51% last year access an AP course. And so what the schools are doing is they are looking to identify what we call those missing AP students. So students who maybe have been overlooked for whatever reason and aren't taking AP classes but have some key indicators that they could be successful. And again, we know that the research shows if they access AP in high school, the data connecting to their college completion is much greater. And so that's what we're working on, is to make those numbers come closer together as we continue to work on our AP enrollment. And we also know that we need to have some supports in place as we have those first-time AP students. And so we have increased our AP enrollments for next year with students taking one AP course. We increased that by 82, and students taking more than one AP course by 18. So our overall AP course enrollment for the district has increased for this current school year by 149. And this slide here, so a little more AP data, this is looking at our number of students who took an AP exam and overall exams taken, because again, a student might be in more than one AP class and might take more than one AP exam. So if you just think about the trends show the increases in the number of students taking exams and overall exams taken. I will say that not all students in an AP class take the exam, and so that's another area that we want to start to track and look at and find out why that's happening and what can we do to encourage kids to take that final step in the AP course by taking the exam. And so we had 107 more students taking AP exams, and overall had 214 more AP exams written from last school year. And you may recall the presentation last September by Francis Howell Central, so they had started that initial work of increasing their AP enrollment, so you can kind of see some of the outcomes with the exams. They contributed to that, and that domino effect is happening with our other schools now as well. So what's really neat is you think about, again, those increases in the next slide. We increased our overall AP exams by 214, and we had 107 more students taking AP exams. So many times when you increase large numbers, you see dips in your data. We did not. And so that says a lot about we push students to take that stretch, and they did. So we were able to, if you look at our percentage of students in exam scoring 3+, we had a slight increase in our students who scored a 3 or higher, and we had a 2.3% increase in the overall percentage of exam scoring 3 or higher. So we increased our exams by 270%, and yet we still increased the percent scoring 3 or higher. So that is not always typical. That's a huge celebration. And just a reminder about what the AP scores mean. They go from a 1 to a 5, and that 3 is typically considered passing. It means that if a student gets a 3 on the AP exam, he or she has proven him or herself capable of doing the work of an introductory college level course. And that's where most colleges will award college placement or college credit. Some will say it has to be a 4 or 5, but that's the benefit of that AP exam and getting that college credit. We haven't received our graduate ACT data yet. So the national ACT average is always based on the most recent scores of high school graduates. So there was not a national average based on the junior ACT scores. And we've received this data for the last 3 years because DESE had paid for all of the juniors in Missouri to take the ACT, and so that's why we were able to get this data. And so we just get it for our district, and we can compare ourselves to Missouri. So you'll see that our juniors' average composite score, it did slightly go down, as well as Missouri, but we're still scoring 2.1 points higher than the Missouri junior average, which is statistically significant, which means it's something other than just random chance. So, and again, we don't have our senior data yet, and the senior ACT data is what's connected to the APR. And so we'll provide that information at the academic workshop in October. So just another piece of data that I want to share with our junior ACT data. This slide has 4 years of, this has 3 years of data, and the composite one you just saw, but then I wanted to show the other areas for where we are scoring in our sub scores for English, math, reading, and science. And what you'll see are red bars in the 4 subject area tests. That is the ACT benchmark for being college ready. And so ACT has determined a composite score within the subject areas to say if you're scoring at an 18 in English, you're considered college ready, which means you have a 50% chance or higher of scoring a B, or 75% of scoring a C or higher in that comparable college class when you're a first-time freshman. And so again, then for math and reading and science. So we are on average well above the mark for English, and we have a little bit of room to grow for math, reading, and science. Elementary and middle school students take the GATES reading assessment, and we use the GATES to determine that grade level equivalency for our students in reading. So as you can see from the data, pretty steady of where we are with some slight increases. And our goal really is to really get to that 80% mark. That's where we want to have at least 80% of our students reading at or above grade level. The next two slides break this data down into elementary and middle. And so here's the elementary reading data for the last 5 years. For the last school year, in 3rd grade, we increased and we had 74% of our students reading at or above grade level. In 4th and 5th, we had close to 80% reading at or above grade level. Middle school, there's a trend that you can see in the data where there's this dip in 6th grade, and so 6th grade went down to 73%, although they increased from the previous school year. 7th grade was 78%, and then 8th grade, 81.5%. So even though 3rd and 6th grade have smaller percentages of students reading at above grade level, as the students progress through their grade levels, they make up that ground and have increases overall by the time they hit 8th grade. But we certainly are mindful of the data and looking at what's happening in 3rd and 6th grade and how can we support more in those areas. Our attendance rates, you might recall that with MSIP 5, districts changed the way that we had to look at our attendance. So the expectation is that 90% of our students attend school 90% of the time. And so we exceed that across the board, pretty steady attendance rate. We did have a dip of 1.5%. It was a decrease in our 90-90 rate based on our internal calculations at this time. We don't have our APR back yet, so it's on our calculations. I will say that across St. Charles County, they saw similar decreases as well. But we know even with this slight dip in our attendance, we still expect to earn all of our attendance points on the APR. And this next slide is just data that we collect and look at. It's our 10+ absences, because certainly this data then connects back to the 90-90. Students who tend to have absences beyond 10 are eventually not going to make the 90-90 mark. And so our goal is to see those trend lines going in the other way. But as you can see, if we had a dip in our attendance, there were increases in this area. And schools do monitor this data and utilize that to do interventions with students. So our behavior data, these are our ISS and OSS counts across the district. And so as you can see, our goal was to decrease ISS by 3% and OSS by 5%. So we did have a decrease across the district in ISS and a small increase across the district in OSS. I will point out though, at the middle school level, they had a decrease in in-school suspension incidents by 119. And at the high school level, they decreased out-of-school suspension incidents by 84, which for the high school, and that's pretty significant. And so our end goal is to really work on reducing those behaviors that result in these consequences. And so the schools continue to have this be a part of their school improvement plans as well as part of our CSIP. So some strengths and celebrations from our data, our advanced placement across the board in our enrollment, and our students taking exams and our exam scores, our continually high graduation rate. Even though we had, I think there's pockets of celebrations within our behavior data, and then our reading. Those are just some of the highlights. In improvement strategies, and we'll certainly look more into our data as we get the rest of our map data and we get our APR, but just at a first blush from this current data, even though I have AP as a celebration, we know it's also an area where we're going to continue to work on and improve. We want to work on closing that gap for access to AP and getting kids to stretch themselves to take the AP class. So with that, we know that we need to have supports in place for those first-time AP students. And we're doing that this year with a course called AP Foundations that first-time AP students that have never taken an honors or pre-AP can take parallel to their AP class to provide that parallel support. And we're also looking at how can we support our AP teachers with some ongoing professional development through the College Board. We want to continue to have those practice opportunities for our students with ACT, so giving it the kind of mock ACT as a sophomore, and then continuing to offer the junior ACT to our students. The social emotional supports, that kind of connects to the ESCs that were added at the elementary level, and so there is a with Sherry McGeisha, who is our mental health coordinator, working with all of the ESCs and with the group to be able to utilize a common assessment tool and a treatment plan for students in need of social emotional support. So it's this continuum of support, and so making sure that what we do to help support our social emotional needs, that it's very intentional. And restorative practices, we have schools in different places with that, but we want to continue to support those efforts and support those that are implementing, looking at restorative practices, because we know that that is one way to make a difference with our behaviors and our students. Research-based literacy interventions, we provided professional development to our elementary principals this summer about how to monitor the entrance and exit criteria around those interventions. And then at the middle school, we had rolled out the reader-writer workshop modified version of that in 6th grade, so we'll continue to monitor that. And this year, we're adding it in 7th and 8th grade. So those are some of the improvement strategies that we feel will inform our data throughout the 17-18 school year.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Hain.
Yeah, I had a quick question for you. I know you've added some improvement strategies there, and going back to the junior ACT data for math and science in particular, I know we have STEM and STEAM and PLTW and all these other acronyms. Is there something that we're going to be targeting or changing, or is this just a transitional thing that those programs haven't fully implemented, or why do we have that discrepancy there?
A couple of things there. 2 years ago, we worked on changing our criteria for some of our challenge classes in middle school. Instead of having to meet 3 criteria, it was 2, because we want to expose our students to those classes at an earlier age. And we know that if we have more students able to take algebra in 8th grade, that then allows them to get to algebra 2, which again helps with the ACT test. So increasing the numbers of students taking algebra in 8th grade. And then the other, as our curriculum revisions are happening, we're adding more ACT type questions into our assessments. And in fact, we were just at a SIP meeting at one of the schools, and they were speaking about just even some additional work that they're doing around some of that intentional adding ACT questions into some of their starter activities, but that's one way that we can inform that throughout the core areas, is those ACT questions in the assessments.
I have a question. Is the ACT at the junior level going to continue to be funded this year?
DESE is not going to fund that, and that will be one of the items that we'll be bringing forward to you for approval. The recommendation is that we would we started giving the ACT to our juniors prior to
Right.
DESE, but DESE with their assessment budget being cut, they are not including the funding this year.
Okay, that's what I thought I had heard was the case.
That is correct.
I think it's very important to help our students prepare. Based on the data that you've been evaluating, what do you think our biggest concern is for this next school year to bring our kids forward?
I would say it's about fidelity of implementation of what we're doing. So having the strong tier 1 instruction, and then working on our the research-based intervention. So as we look at a lot of our SIPs, they might have some tweaks, but not a lot of new. It's making sure that what we're doing, we're good at, and especially supporting. We have 103 new teachers, and so making sure that with our new teachers in the classroom that they are supported, and that again that tier 1 instruction is strong. And then, because if that's not strong, then that's a foundational issue. And then from there, how do you identify students that are in need of support to be able to have that tier 2? And I think the other big component is the social emotional supports. We heard that a lot throughout last year, that the behaviors then were also impacting achievement if a student's not at school or they're out of the classroom. And so the structures that are being put in place through Dr. Vanderpool and his team to really help us be proactive and help with social emotional needs, I think is also is really important this year.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the information. Board, next on our agenda is the MSIP 6 ESSA update.
That's me again.
Back to you, okay?
Yes. So just a quick overview of school improvement in Missouri. So we have our Missouri School Improvement Plan, which is our state's accountability system, and that's where the annual performance report, the APR, comes from, and that outlines what students are expected to do for achievement with that ultimate goal of being college and career ready. And then we have the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is federal law, which replaces No Child Left Behind. And DESE would also DESE, if they were here talking, they would say that MSIP is about district and student performance, whereas ESSA is about equitable opportunities and access for students. And it looks more at schools and subgroups. So just a little overview on MSIP 6. So our Missouri School Improvement Plan, there's always a number behind it because that means the version that it's in. So MSIP started in the 1990s and it's been through several iterations. So we're on the 5th iteration right now, and there's going to be some tweaks to that and some overhauls, and we will then be under MSIP 6 here in the near future. And so the timeline for DESE to revise and have a new MSIP 6, the work groups, there are different areas. Work groups started in the spring of this year, met monthly, and the goal is to then to have that work put into a draft document that will be available for public comment in November. And then they will take that document to the state board for approval in January of 2018. And these are the 6 work groups. We had one of our own, David Brothers, the Director of Assessment and Summer Programs, was selected to be part of the Academic Achievement Work Group. And so these are the 6 work groups, and what I want to point out is that the first 2, if you look left to right, academic achievement and success-ready graduates, those 2 areas are about student performance. The others, the next 3, climate and culture, and then the 2 on the bottom, the 2 that start with effective, are about processes. And the last one, systems and processes, is really putting it all together. And so I'm just going to give a couple highlights about each of the 5 areas. So academic achievement would be probably what you think it is. That's going to be about our assessments. That work group's going to examine what we currently do under MSIP 5 with assessments, and then what recommendations would they make to change it all with our assessments, or how growth or progress is measured. Success-ready graduates, if you think about what we do right now under MSIP 5, we just have our graduation rate. So they want to look beyond that, and they want to make recommendations about how to best evaluate the entire school system as it prepares its graduates for college, for career, and for life. And so they're looking at non-remediation, attendance, internships, career exploration. And so they, what I envision happening there is to develop readiness indicators, not just graduation rate, but readiness indicators before or after kindergarten, before you go to middle school, before you go to high school, and then when you leave high school. And having those different areas, and they might have indicators around just some general readiness indicators, academic readiness indicators, leadership, co-curricular, career, citizenship. So it's definitely going to be not just an end game, but points along the way, and how that whole system comes together for preparing our students. And so climate and culture moves into the process. And so we know that climate and culture are intangibles in our school system, and they are drivers of student success. And so this work group is going to make recommendations on what are some process measures around what impacts climate and culture. So high expectations, having your mission, vision, values, and goals, your leadership contribution to the culture, what is your system of support, that multi-tiered system of support look for students in all areas, academic, social, emotional, having that safe and caring environment, and how do you utilize your climate data with your staff and with your community. And so they will have to then determine what that's going to look like for that school system. Effective and stable leadership and in governance, that team is going to look at issues around instructional leadership in schools. And so, and besides just that, they're also going to look at governance and management, fiscal responsibility, and some policy and resources. And so again, it's those process measures. So they're going to develop some process measures around the different variations of leadership that needs to happen. So visionary, instructional, managerial, relational, innovative, equity. And under governance, they're going to just determine some process measures around policy, missions and vision and goals, your how do you evaluate your teachers and develop your teachers, your professional development, your resource management. And then effective and stable leadership, or effective educators and instructional practices. Again, that's a process measure, and they're gonna make recommendations about the district in terms of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and process measures all around those three areas. And again, the last one, like I said, systems and processes, they're gonna figure out how to put it all together. What's that gonna look like in the APR? So what DESI's gonna try to do to help the schools and the districts is to possibly run a joint APR. So for 2018, we would get our regular APR like we've always seen under MSIP 5, and then get a private APR that wouldn't be released to the media. It would just go to individual districts. We wouldn't be able to see other people's. That would help us understand what it looks like for MSIP 6. The timeline is that they would be adopting the MSIP 6 standards and indicators at that board meeting in January, begin piloting, and have full implementation 2 years later in January 2020. So kind of have a year of what the pilot looks like, maybe making some tweaks to it. So more to come on that. And so then I want to move into ESSA because they are connected. So ESSA, again, is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It replaces No Child Left Behind. And so every state had to submit a plan, and we submitted our plan actually is right now for Missouri on the governor's desk waiting for a signature. And once he signs it, he's got a few more, I think, days to sign it. It will be submitted to the U.S. Department of Ed for review. We won't hear back from the U.S. Department of Ed, or DESI won't hear back until January or February of 2018. So I wanted to pull out some highlights of ESSA, and I will say that DESI, for the most part, feels like what we've been doing with MSIP 5 connects well to ESSA. So there's not a whole lot of major changes for the state of Missouri. There are a few. And so within ESSA, we will be required to give the ELA and math assessments. We do, but there will be annual targets to meet with your proficiency and with your MPI. What's going to be new is English language. So we went from ESOL, English as second language, to another acronym, English language learners, and it's EL, which is just English learners. So we've never measured as a part of a standard proficiency on progressing towards speaking English. So that is going to change, and there will be annual targets to meet. You have to have a school quality or student success indicator. Missouri has chose that to be 90/90 attendance, so that's not new for us. You have to have your graduation rate by high school, and then this is what is new. So in the past few years, we've been under the super subgroup where they've taken all of that data together. They're going to farm it back out individually. So we have to disaggregate our data by subgroup for not only our assessments, but also for graduation rate. And then if within each subgroup, there are annual targets to meet for your MPI score and your proficient and advanced students. And then there's going to be new reporting groups, not accountability, just reporting groups of data for those same areas for assessments for homeless students, students that are in foster care, students of military dependents, and gifted students. So just some big ideas between MSIP 6 and ESSA, those proficiency targets for our English language students. We're going back to individual versus super subgroup. We're going to look at graduation rates by subgroup, and for that success rated graduates, right now our college and career expectations are going to be more than just ACT, advanced placement, and post-high school placement. It's going to be those other indicators along the way, and then that achievement data by other groups, which will be new for us. And that's it. Just a quick little overview on those two.
Board, any questions? Great information. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Patrick?
I had a question.
You just weren't fast enough.
EL students, EL students, I call them newcomers, students that are new to the nation. Will they be exempt for a year like they are now if only in ELA, in English Language Arts.
Yeah, in MSIP 6, I didn't see any changes to that in the recommendations of what was happening right now.
Okay. I knew they had to take math, science, but I knew they were exempt from English, just
Yes.
1 year.
Just what I've read so far, they haven't specified that in just the recommendations from the work groups for
Okay.
MSIP 6.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Great. Excellent information. Thank you for that. Board, next on our agenda is the MSBA Board Report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report for the month of August. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the future of school boards. Despite some critics who claim locally elected boards of education are an outdated form of governing our public schools, a professor and researcher at Seattle Pacific University, Dr. Thomas Alsbury, says school boards have proven to be the most effective way to govern local school districts. He says there's a reason the responsibility for education has been left to states and local communities.
And researchers have supported the concept that not only is it important for kids, the work that you do, but it is actually important for our country. And I think that's a very important message that's sometimes lost. It's been said that the local school board is one of the last, actually, remnants of true local government left in the United States. There's a good reason to maybe preserve it.
Alsbury advocates what he calls a balanced governance model for school boards that emphasizes informed oversight that is neither disengaged nor overreaching in its decision-making. He made his remarks at MSBA's recent Leadership Summit. Registration is now open for the 2017 MSBA Annual Conference to be held October 5th through the 8th at the Lake of the Ozarks. The event features more than 120 concurrent sessions. Most are presented by MSBA member school districts. Also, be sure your school board is represented at the MSBA Fall Delegate Assembly to be held on Friday, October 6th during the annual conference. This delegate assembly will be considering approval of MSBA's advocacy positions document that combines legislative resolutions, platform statements, and position statements from the Missouri Public Education Vision Project into a single document. The new advocacy positions document will form the basis of MSBA's lobbying efforts during the 2018 session of the Missouri General Assembly. Delegates do not have to be registered for the annual conference in order to participate in the delegate assembly, and if your board's designated delegate cannot attend, you can send another board member to represent your board at this important meeting. The debate over school choice continues at both the state and federal levels. School choice takes many different forms, including vouchers, open enrollment, charter schools, and choice options within the public schools. Most recently here in Missouri, the General Assembly considered but did not approve legislation to establish what are called education savings accounts for parents to use to send their children to public or private schools using taxpayer dollars. Commissioner of Education Margie Van Dieven told an audience at MSBA's recent Leadership Summit, supporters of the concept often argue that schools will improve simply because parents have a choice.
That is probably where we are right now at the federal level, is that there's this sense of belief that if parents have the ability to use their dollars to send kids anywhere they choose, that'll create better opportunities. And I think that's the one that we're going to have to really work through as a state on what that means and what that looks like, because clearly parents are your, the children's best advocates, and we want to support the belief of the parent. And yet, as these two alluded to so passionately, a solid public education system is absolutely vital to a state's prosperity. no matter where you choose to send your child. You absolutely have to have a thriving public school system for all of our children to access.
Van Dieven says in states that have some sort of choice option, the vast majority of parents continue to send their children to a nearby public school. She made her comments during a panel discussion, including State Board of Education Vice President Vic Lenz and MSBA Executive Director Melissa Randall. As students, teachers, and staff are returning to begin a new school year, it's a good time to think about ways we are keeping our schools as safe as possible. MSBA's Center for Education Safety reminds school administrators it's a good time to review your district's emergency operations plans. It's also a good time for administrators and those responsible for school safety issues to reconnect with all agencies in your community that might be involved in responding to an emergency situation. By the way, the annual Safe Schools and Colleges Conference, sponsored by MSBA Center for Education Safety, is set for October 4th and 5th at the Lake of the Ozarks, just prior to this year's annual conference. Registration information is available through the MSBA website. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Great, looking forward to the conference coming up. Board, next on our agenda is purchases over $7,500. I'll entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Discussion? By roll call.
Mr. Lang,
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Monthly financial report. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the June and July 2017 financial statements as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Ferguson, seconded by Mr. Hain. Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. The June statements are preliminary. I think that was noted in the memo to the board. We do sometimes have some corrections to the placement of expenses or revenue based on the audit that's conducted, and that won't be finished until later this year. And so they are noted as preliminary. But I did want to point out just a couple of things. So this is a slide. This was on the last sheet of your memo. And it shows what the actual results are relative to our revised budget, which was approved in November, and then the forecast that I provided to the board earlier this year. So as you look, we were anticipating that we would end the year with about 1% revenue higher than what was budgeted and expenditures about 1% less. And the actual preliminary results show that our revenue was about 1.4% higher and our expenditures about 1.2% lower. And so we did end this year with a surplus of $2.7 million of revenue over expense. And so our ending fund balance is about 21.6%. So we're well within the board policy relative to fund balances. And then also, just a little bit lower, you can see that this is the breakdown by category for those various revenue and expense categories. So, of course, our local category, property taxes being the main item there, we had that accounted for the majority of the additional revenue. And in the supply area, that really was the majority of the additional underspending of the budget. I think it's notable that the majority of our budget is salary and benefits. That makes up somewhere around 85% of our total expenditures. And on that, almost $117 million budget. We were just under it by $100,000. So we do a really good job of budgeting our salaries, and similarly with benefits, almost $37 million budgeted there, and only $107,000 variance from the projected to the actual. So I just wanted to share that information with you as part of the discussion this evening.
Board, any questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Supple. By roll call?
Mr. Hain,
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, I entertain a motion to approve the 2016-17 Annual Secretary of the Board Report as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Ferguson, second by Mrs. Lang. By roll call?
Mrs. Lang,
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. We'll move into work session. Are we going to stay here? We'll stay here for tonight. And our topic for our work session is the 2017-18 tax rate. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. Information was provided to the board in advance of the meeting, and I just want to go over a little bit of that. One of the points that I want to make as I go through the presentation this evening is that assessed valuation is a constantly moving target, so it changes every day. And so just a couple things to note. This first slide shows that in March of this year, when we were working on the projected tax liability notice, we had estimated assessed valuation of about $2,564 million, and that was a little over 8% increase from the assessed value numbers that we received from the assessor for December 31, 2016. And then when we get we also get an update in July, and when we got our July numbers, that total assessed valuation had increased a little bit to $2,570 million, so up just about 1/4 of a percentage point. And so now we find ourselves at the point where the Board of Equalization has completed their work, and the numbers that we have right now show that our assessed valuation is about $2,532 million. So it's down about 1.5% from the July numbers. And so if you take a look at where it was relative to the time when we did the projected tax liability notice, last time this board had a conversation, it's about 1.25% lower than where we were. A big shift, of course, can be seen in the biggest shifts, I would say, would be in the new construction number. Then there's a great deal of variability there depending upon when the assessor places those values onto the books. And so typically as a property is under construction, a portion of the value is placed on the assessment rolls, and when it's completed, the remainder is placed. So I'm not too worried about the shift in those new construction numbers. It may be a timing issue relative to when those values are placed on the books. Just another way to look at these numbers would be where we were last year at this time and where we are this year at this time. So last year at the beginning of August, as we were having these conversations, our assessed value was $2,380 million. This year it's $2,532 million. And so that's about a 6.4% increase in our overall assessed valuation. So that's very good news. We're continuing to see a positive trend, and not only are we seeing an increase in our assessed value, but this is a larger increase than what we saw in the 2015 reassessment. So things are definitely moving in the right direction. It's important to point out, and I'll certainly do this when we have the hearing to approve the rate at September's meeting, but to remember that individuals' property tax bills do not increase in direct relationship to the change in assessed value. we are required to roll back our rate based on growth in assessed value that's in excess of either the CPI or 5%, whichever is lower. This year's CPI was 2.1%. So that's the amount of growth that we're able to capture. So it's great that our assessed value is growing by 6.4%, but that won't be directly reflected in individuals' tax bills. And to that point, this is our projected tax rate. So you can see that in April, when we brought the projected tax liability notice, we were projecting that our rate would decrease by about 20 cents from our current rate of $5.01.85 to $4.82.13, so almost a 4% decrease. Based on the change in assessed value that we've seen between April and now, we're projecting that our rate's going to go down, but only by about 12 cents to $4.89.95, or about 2.4% decrease. And again, that has to do with the shift in assessed values between what we were provided in April when we did the projected tax liability notice and what was available to us with the after Board of Equalization. So you can see here that our total assessed value has decreased by about $32 million, or about a 1.25% decrease. And so we will continue to take a look at that, and we'll probably get one additional document from the county prior to setting the tax rate, but I feel comfortable that this paints a very good picture of what will be happening with our rate as we move forward.
Board, any questions? Okay. Mr. Supple, thank you very much for the information. Superintendent comments.
Yes, just a couple things I want to report to the board. I'm happy to report the beginning of the school year was smooth. There's always much excitement and anticipation as we begin our first day, and I feel like this year that was even more so. Our beginning of the year activities, our transition days, our open houses, our coaches' nights have all been going well and have been well attended. As you know, and have probably heard, this year as part of our reductions, we cut transportation for transition day. While we did experience some traffic concerns, we did not see a significant decrease in our transition day attendance. So just wanted to give you that update. You'll be hearing more details during the summer school report, but this summer Francis Howell started a kindergarten success program where we brought our kindergartners in at many schools over the summer for a taste of kindergarten prior to the first day. One of the things I love to do is to go out and visit the kindergartners in those first couple weeks of school, and it seems like that program has eased some of the transition. So the beginning of school year in the kindergarten classroom seems to be going a little smoother this year. I know that last time we were all together was kickoff. I know I've reviewed the kickoff surveys, and a couple things that are worth noting. The participants excuse me, preferred the Francis Howell High School venue. So it looks like we will be using that venue again moving forward. While the board's speech was recognized and commented on as being something that they liked, especially the collaboration part, Mr. Riffey was the #1 hit of the day. So be it, exactly. I know that the board's been notified a few times this week of a few bus fender benders, and so far this year, these have all been extremely minor in nature. I want you to know that I'm notifying you of each and every incident to keep you informed, even when those are just little itty-bitty things. And so it might seem like there's an increase in frequency, but it might also be an increase in communication. So as you're driving around town and seeing some of those little fender benders, I just want to make sure that you are aware that those are just little fender benders and some bumps. Kisses, as sometimes Mr. Butler tries to call them. Text messages. One of the things new this school year is a dramatic reduction in release days provided for our teachers. They've used this in the past for collaboration and training. In addition to providing professional development, the time teachers spent on developing plans for individual students, reviewing data as a team, and being active in course placement will be decreased this year. We're hopeful that we'll be able to reinstate this at some point. In the meantime, there are some benefits So there's been a monetary savings as we reallocated those funds, as well as, we have a shortage in the area of substitutes. So temporarily, we're able to see those positive effects of that decrease of release days. Last but not least, you might have heard there's going to be a solar eclipse on Monday. The district and our schools have been making preparations. Students have been learning and are being trained in safety measures. We understand that there are likely going to be some traffic delays, and we're excited to be maximizing the learning opportunity for our students. We've been in touch with the St. Charles Police Department and the emergency management team. Everyone is very ready for this event. If you'd like to join us here at admin, there's a little something planned up here, as well as at any of our schools or your buddy schools. You're invited, and as you know, we have been able to provide all of our students and you all with some safety-approved glasses. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you very much. Board, next on our agenda is Board of Education requests. This is the time that we bring forward any ideas that we would like for consideration to see if anyone else on the board agrees and would like some additional information or research done. Do we have any board requests at this time? No. Okay, thank you. Let's take a look at our upcoming meetings. First, we have our September 21st meeting. Do we have any additions or corrections? Mr. Supple?
Yes, Mrs. Cope, I had a meeting today with some of my colleagues, and we are examining creating a stop-loss insurance captive, which is a new approach to providing coverage for claims above a particular dollar amount within our medical plan. We hope it'll be a way for us to save some money. There may be some legal work associated with that, so if everything proceeds as planned, I will probably be bringing some documents to the board for approval at the September meeting.
Saving money is always a good thing. Let's take a look. Okay, so we can add that.
You also notice that we have a policy first read on there. We'll also be bringing a policy for approval.
Any other additions, board? Okay, great. Let's look at our October 12th meeting. Any additions or corrections? Okay, great. Board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting. Motion made by Mr. Hain, seconded by Mrs. Lang, by roll call.
Mr. Lane,
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.